The voicemail was still playing when the glass slipped in my hand. I caught it before it shattered, but a crimson thread of wine traced down my wrist, staining the cuff of my blouse. "Mom," my daughter's voice said, flat, clipped, too polished to sound like the child I raised. "Jonathan and I talked it over with his mother. We think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. We'll send you the link to LiveStream it. No apology, no explanation, just a verdict." Her voice carried the faintest background, murmur his voice, Jonathan's, low and decisive. Then the voicemail clicked off, leaving me in the kitchen with only the rattle of desert wind against the window. That's how it happened. Not a conversation, not even an argument. Just a message delivered like a notice on a door. After 6 decades of living, of surviving, of raising 2 children alone after my husband's sudden heart attack in the middle of an ordinary Saturday, I was reduced to a muted square on a computer screen. I set the glass down on the counter, steady as stone, though I could feel something in me beginning to shift, a seam loosening under pressure. It didn't break yet, not then. If you've ever been told you were too much, or not enough if you've ever been invited to your own child's life from the sidelines, tell me below. Comment. Like. Stay with me until the end of this story. Because they thought I would be silent. They thought I would bow out quietly, but the desert has taught me something they don't know. Silence is never empty. It's the space before the storm breaks. My name is Clara Moreno. I am 60 years old. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where the sky opens so wide you feel both infinite and invisible under it. I have worked nearly 20 years as a paralegal at a mid-sized architecture firm. The pay isn't glamorous, but it has kept food on the table, tuition covered, and my children's lives padded with opportunities I never had. Sophia, my eldest, is 33 now. The bride, beautiful, ambitious, sharper than glass. She learned early how to walk into a room and bend it to her will. For her wedding, she chose a vineyard in Napa Valley, something out of a magazine spread. I had already wired $40,000 for deposits. Another $50,000 was scheduled to transfer by Friday. $90,000, that's what I was willing to give, to make her day glow. And Mateo, my son, 3 years younger. He's the gentle one, but unreliable in the ways that matter. His cafe dream collapsed within 2 years. The debt is still circling. I helped with that, too. I always helped. That's what mothers do, right? We carve ourselves down into splinters and still offer the pieces as firewood for everyone else's comfort. I replayed the voicemail a second time, just to hear the words again, to make sure I hadn't invented the cruelty in my head. But no, the words didn't soften on repetition. They hardened. "We think it's best if you don't come." Not "we love you," not "we're sorry," just a decision, as if my presence could be cut out like a misprinted page. And then, salt in the wound, her voice brightened with a little laugh, careless and cruel. "We'll send you the link. It'll feel just like being there. LOL. LOL. I had to sit down, not from grief, but from the sheer audacity. My daughter, whose diapers I washed by hand when the washer broke and the money wasn't there to replace it. My daughter, who cried on the phone to me after her second breakup, and I flew cross-country with my last savings just to hold her. My daughter, who used to press paper flowers into my hand in kindergarten and whisper, "Keep this forever." Now she sent me a LiveStream link with LOL. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I did what I have always done when the ground beneath me shifts. I went still. Stillness has power. It makes the other person fill the silence with their own guilt. I walked to my laptop, opened her email because of course she sent it in writing too, and I typed only 4 words in reply. "Sure, enjoy your big day." No exclamation point, no heart emoji, just 4 words that felt like both a blade and a shield. And when I hit send, I knew something had ended. Not just the illusion of closeness, not just the fantasy that sacrifice is always rewarded. No, what ended was my willingness to beg for the bare minimum of love. I closed the laptop. I drank what was left of the wine. Then I rinsed the glass, set it upside down on the rack, and went to get ready for work. It was Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday, but I knew, with the kind of certainty that settles into your bones, that nothing about my life would be ordinary again. Grief didn't teach me how to cry. It taught me how to calculate. The year my husband died, the coroner's timestamp looked like a bill due date, 1:17 p.m., on a Saturday, in the produce aisle, next to a pyramid of oranges. I spent the next 12 months dividing everything by what was left. Hours, dollars, miles, favors. Widows in Santa Fe don't get parades. We get paperwork and casserole dishes returned clean, but never to the right cupboard. I learned to stretch a paycheck like dough. I learned to skim contracts for traps because life loved a hidden clause. I learned that if you read anything twice, bank statements, report cards, emails, you'd always find the part that hurt. By Wednesday morning one night after the voicemail, I woke up before the sun, the desert ink black except for the thin cut of dawn. The swamp cooler hummed its old song. My phone lay face down on the nightstand, silent only because I'd made it so. I didn't want to see the notifications that would try to turn my love into a customer service department. I made coffee the way I like it, strong, unkind, honest. At the kitchen table, I took out the blue binder I call the house brain. It's where the life others assume happens by magic is itemized with stubborn math. Mortgage amortizations, utility cycles, scholarship terms, childcare receipts from a decade ago, a list of every medicine I ever picked up at the pharmacy under someone else's name. Expecting nothing in return is not sainthood. It's a survival tactic. But it makes you soft in the places you need to be steel. Sophia's tabs were a map of belief. University tuition when she changed majors twice and a third time just to round it out. A move to New York for a job that evaporated like rain on hot clay. Another move to Austin, because the industry's there now. Flight confirmations with my name, not hers. Because I was the one who showed up with a suitcase of casseroles and the kind of hugs that could stand against hurricanes. I kept everything, even the sticky notes she left as a teenager. Buy oat milk. Is less than 3, because it's hard to throw away handwriting when you've watched a person learn the alphabet with their tongue poked between their teeth. Mateo's tabs told a kinder story that still cost. The cafe lease with the crooked landlord who smiled with all his teeth, the espresso machine invoice, I negotiated down by reminding the salesman he also sold refrigerators to churches. When Mateo's partner ghosted both in business and in bed, I sublet the storefront to a woman who makes sculptures from bottle glass. I covered the last 2 months of rent myself so his credit wouldn't drown. I told him it was a loan. He told me he'd pay me back. We both pretended we believed it. Love has receipts. I keep mine. At 7, the sky turned that Santa Fe blue that belongs on pottery and in the lungs. I showered, dressed, braided my hair like the women in the old photos of my mother's village, and drove to Victor Hale and Associates, where I have spent 19 years being the ram in the thicket and the quiet in the storm. Paralegals are the engineers of other people's confidence. We are also the ones who see exactly how little holds most lives together. A signature, a deadline, a stranger's mercy. Victor has a way of noticing in the polite corners. He paused at my desk with a paper cup of black tea, the lemon slice perched like a crescent moon. "You look like someone changed the locks on your favorite room," he said. It's his way of asking, "Are you all right?" while leaving me the dignity to say no without showing proof. "It's nothing urgent," I said, which is often what women say when the house is on fire, but only in a part guests won't see. He didn't press. He set down the tea and went to his 9:30 mediation, where a man in a black suit would call a woman honey and wonder why the settlement number increased. The morning moved the way all mornings do when you're choosing not to bleed in public. Emails, filings, drafting language that says things without saying them. I booked a courier, I flagged a clause. I accepted a parcel with an unnecessary amount of bubble wrap. At 10:12, my screen flashed a bank notification reminding me the scheduled transfer to the vineyard would post Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. The number sat there like a dare. 50,000. Another 10 for ancillary experiences. 2 more for a custom champagne wall I pretended not to understand. I stared until the screen dimmed. I thought of my husband's laugh, big and boyish, and the way he used to say, "We'll make it stretch, Clara," and how he'd snap the waistband of his own thrifted pants to prove it. I thought of the night I pawned my grandmother's ring and bought it back 6 months later, cheap metal smell flaking my fingers. I thought of Sophia at 15, furious and luminous, saying, "I didn't get it," and me saying, "I don't have to get it to love you." There's a cruelty that feels like a misprint, like the typesetter set your child's name in the wrong font and the whole page tilted. I kept waiting for a second email with the subject line, "Ignore last message, Mom. We were wrong." The inbox stayed quiet, buzzing with everything except the one thing that would have cost her nothing. At lunch, I pretended to want a salad and ate crackers from my drawer. I watched a fly fail to find the open window. I thought, with the kind of clarity that scares you with its calm, I've been auditioning for a role I already played for 33 years. Mother. Not financier. Not placeholder. Not silent partner to someone else's optics. When you move through pain, people expect you to do it theatrically. The door slam, the raised voice, the dramatic goodbye. But stillness is a weapon if you learn where to aim it. I started making a list on a pale green legal pad. Title at the top. After. Underlined twice. Call bank. Cancel scheduled transfer. Print last wire confirmation and attach to binder. Pull copies of emails divided by texts. LiveStream. Disinvite. Change passwords. Strip autofill of stored data. Tidy house. Keep only what is mine by choice, not duty. I added one more line I didn't say out loud. Do not explain. When I love people, I translate for them. I translate their meanness into stress, their neglect into busyness, their ask into an almost apology. It's an old language and I am fluent in it, but fluency is not the same as truth. That afternoon, a text from Sophia lit my lock screen. Can we talk? 5 minutes later. This is spiraling. Another 10. Jonathan's mother is very traditional, Mom. It's complicated. The word traditional did a little pirouette and bowed. Tradition, as Celeste uses it, means an algorithm of seating charts where my face ruins the brand. I didn't reply. I opened my email and read her original message one more time, looking for a splinter of compassion I'd missed. The LOL winked up at me like a label on a bottle of poison that reads maple syrup. I screenshotted it and slid it into a folder marked Wedding, not vindictive meticulous. Evidence is a kindness to your future self. When I finally left the office, the desert had pulled her heat back like a curtain. Evening is the hour Santa Fe forgives everything. I drove the long way home, down a street lined with cottonwoods so old they lean without falling. In the rearview mirror, my face looked like my mother's in the moments she chose her spine over her smile. At a red light, a memory surfaced that had lived quietly behind my ribs. Sophia at 7, hair 2 sizes too big for her head, standing on a dining chair so she could reach the counter. "Can I crack the eggs?" she asked. "You can try," I said, and she smashed them with joyful violence, yellow and clear sliding into the bowl like a small disaster. She cried when shells fell in. "It's ruined," she whispered. I sifted, plucked out what didn't belong, showed her how to stir. "We don't throw out cake batter because it starts messy," I said. "We bake anyway." I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. Great advice from a younger version of me. But here's what age grants that youth can't fathom. You also don't bake cake for people who lock you out of the party and ask you to drop it at the door. My porch light flickered on, late but loyal. Inside, I slipped off my shoes and stood on the cool tile like it could lower my pulse. The house held that end-of-day hush that makes you think of church. On the hall table, a stack of envelopes weighted 2 catalogs, one insurance offer, one credit pre-approval with my name spelled right but my middle initial wrong, as if a stranger trying on my skin had guessed and gotten close. I laughed, small and humorless. The world is always inviting women like me to borrow money to fix a breach we didn't make. In the kitchen, I took a pen and crossed out my middle initial, then wrote in large letters across the glossy mailer, "Return to sender. Not dramatic. Accurate." I set the kettle on the stove, reached for my favorite chipped mug, and watched steam ghost the window. The night smelled like dust and far-off rain. I thought of all the ways I'd taught my children to be brave that looked like bending. I thought of how maybe I'd taught them too well that I was elastic. The kettle hissed. I poured and stood there, both hands around heat, and told the room what I hadn't told anyone. I am not negotiable. The desert doesn't clap when you make a vow. It just goes very, very still, as if listening to the exact place the world cracks and resets. I sipped. I felt the line inside me harden into something that wouldn't drag. In the morning, I would dress in the soft navy suit that makes me feel like a sworn statement. I would drive to First Desert Federal and I would say, with the politeness of a scalpel, cancel the transfer. But that was tomorrow's task. Tonight, I folded the blue binder closed, slid it back onto the shelf where I keep the atlas and the cookie tins, and opened the kitchen window wider. The wind nudged the curtain, curious. I let it in. The next morning, the desert sun climbed early, the kind of pale gold that makes the adobe walls glow like they're keeping secrets. I woke with the decision already formed in my chest, solid and unshakable. When conviction comes, it doesn't arrive with trumpets. It slips in like dawn, quiet, certain, irreversible. I pulled on the navy suit, the one I keep for court filings and funerals. It isn't new. The seams are slightly shiny from years of wear, but it makes me feel like a page in a legal record, undeniable, permanent. I braided my hair tight and pinned it, not for style but for armor. Then I slipped my checkbook and the printed email from Sophia into my leather folder. Evidence like talismans. Driving into town, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in the distance, sharp and watchful. I had lived under their shadow my whole life, but that morning I saw them differently, not as background, but as a reminder that stone doesn't apologize for standing. First Desert Federal is a squat building off Cirillo's Road, nothing grand, but its lobby smells of lemon polish and stability. The manager, Anwar Malik, has known me for 20 years. He's seen me through mortgages, tuition funds, refinancing the house after my husband's death. His hair is mostly silver now, his smile unchanged. "Mrs. Moreno," he said warmly, rising from his desk. "What can we do for you today?" I sat down across from him, smoothing the folder on my lap. My voice was calm, level, almost casual. "I need to cancel a wire transfer scheduled for Friday, $50,000 to a venue in Napa." Anwar blinked, typed quickly into his system. "We can do that, of course. There may be a small cancellation fee depending on the timing, but..." He frowned at the screen. "Ah, you're in luck. It hasn't fully processed yet. Just in time." He looked up at me, kind but curious. "Are you sure, Clara? That's a significant amount." I met his gaze. "I'm sure." With a few keystrokes, he clicked the transaction into nothing. The number that had loomed in my inbox, daring me to surrender again, vanished like smoke. For the first time in months, I felt something like oxygen return to my lungs. Anwar slid a form across the desk. "Sign here to confirm cancellation." My hand was steady as I wrote my name. Clara Moreno. A name that had been mother, widow, bank account, afterthought. Today, it was author of her own line in the ledger. "Done," he said, sliding the copy into my folder. Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes, I replied. Print me a statement of my account. I want every record from the past 6 months. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. That's the kind of courtesy a woman like me remembers when someone trusts that your decisions have weight, even if they don't know the story. When I stepped out into the parking lot, the air was warm, dry, buzzing faintly with cicadas. My phone lit up with 12 missed calls, 9 from Sophia, 3 from Matteo. The last voicemail was her voice cracking with desperation. Mom, please don't do this. Don't do this? As if it were I who had swung the blade. As if she hadn't already cut me clean out of her life with the casual cruelty of a LiveStream link. I didn't listen to the rest. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove home along the long stretch of desert highway. The sky was so wide it looked like it could swallow the world. At home, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the blue binder. Into it, I slid the cancellation form and the bank statement. Then I printed Sophia's original email, bolded the line, "It'll be just like being there. LOL. I added it to the folder, like an exhibit in a case. Evidence is oxygen when people try to gaslight you. That evening, the doorbell rang. I almost ignored it, but curiosity made me rise. On the porch stood Matteo, still in his office clothes, tie loosened, hair mussed from running his hands through it. He held his phone like a shield. "Mom," he said, stepping in without waiting for permission. "Why aren't you answering? Sophia's losing it. Jonathan's family is furious." I shut the door calmly. "Hello to you too." He sighed, already pacing. "She says you canceled the transfer, that you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult." I laughed, soft but sharp. Difficult? For not attending a wedding I was uninvited from? He froze, face pale. "Wait, you were sending another 50? "Was," I said, sipping water. "But not anymore." "Mom," he said, voice rising. "They're counting on that. The venue, the food, not my problem anymore." "Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter." "And I'm her mother," I said quietly. A mother who was told to stay home and watch from a screen. The words landed heavier than a shout. His mouth opened, then closed. He dragged his hands through his hair again, pacing like a man trapped in his own argument. "You always make everything about yourself," he snapped. And just like that, the ground cracked open. "Get out of my house," I said. He froze. "What?" "You heard me, Matteo. Get out." His mouth moved like he might argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He turned, muttering under his breath, and the door clicked shut behind him. I stood in the middle of the living room, chest rising and falling, and realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, my phone buzzed with 43 missed calls and a string of frantic texts from Sophia. Some were angry. "This is childish. Why are you doing this?" Some were panicked. "The venue says the payment didn't go through. We're going to lose everything if we don't pay by tomorrow. Andrew's parents are furious." At 3:24 a.m., one message arrived that made me smile into my coffee. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me." Of course, she didn't understand. She had grown up with my sacrifices woven so tightly into her life that she never noticed the pattern. She just assumed the cloth would always be there. But not this time. The desert has a way of echoing silence until it feels like a voice. By Thursday morning, my phone was a hive of unanswered messages, but the house was still. I let it stay that way. There's a strange satisfaction in watching people discover what it feels like when the well they've drawn from runs dry. I carried the blue binder to the kitchen table, spreading its pages out like a lawyer preparing a case. Tuition receipts, wire confirmations, mortgage statements, printouts of Sophia's disinvitation email, all stacked with the precision of someone who has finally stopped apologizing. For decades, I told myself I wasn't keeping score. But mothers keep ledgers in their bones, even if they never balance them on paper. Now, for the first time, I wanted the proof. Not to convince anyone else, just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined the years of sacrifice. By mid-morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, the air smelled of sagebrush and a storm still 2 valleys away. It wasn't Sophia, it was Evelyn Pierce. She stood there like a woman arriving to a boardroom, not a stranger's doorstep. Tailored cream suit, pearl earrings, the kind of polite smile that can cut your throat if you lean in too close. "Clara," she said, as if we were acquaintances instead of adversaries. I was hoping we could talk. My instinct was to slam the door, but instead, I stepped aside. I wanted to see how this performance would play. She walked in slowly, scanning my modest adobe walls like they were an exhibit in a museum she didn't much care for. She didn't sit until I gestured at the couch. Even then, she perched on the edge, legs crossed, handbag placed precisely beside her. "I'll be direct," she began. "This situation with the wedding, it's gotten out of hand. Emotions are running high. You've complicated things by canceling that transfer." I folded my hands, let the quiet stretch. She shifted, not used to being met with silence. "My son and your daughter," she continued, "deserve a beautiful start to their life together. Jonathan's reputation, our family's standing, it all depends on things proceeding smoothly. We need to avoid disruptions." The word disruptions hung in the air like smoke. "So let me clarify," I said, voice calm. "Your solution is to exclude me from my own daughter's wedding, take my money anyway, and expect me to remain silent so your charity friends don't whisper at the gala?" Her polite mask cracked for a split second. Then it reassembled, tighter. "Sometimes sacrifices must be made for tradition." Tradition. That word again. As if it were scripture. As if it excused cruelty. "Sacrifices," I repeated, leaning forward. "Tell me, Evelyn, how many of your own have you made? Because I can list mine every dollar, every sleepless night, every choice that cost me. And now you stand in my living room and suggest I should make one more? For optics?" She blinked. For the first time she seemed uncertain, but only for a heartbeat. Then she smoothed her skirt and gave me a smile sharp as glass. "It would be best for everyone if you remembered your role." I almost laughed. "My role?" "Yes. Mothers give, daughters receive. That's the natural order. Don't mistake generosity for entitlement." And there it was, the quiet cruelty at the core of this entire mess. I wasn't family in their eyes. I was a resource, a wallet with a pulse. I stood. "We're finished here." She opened her mouth to protest, but I was already walking to the door. Out. Her heels clicked against my tile like punctuation marks. At the threshold, she turned back. "Clara, think carefully. Don't do something you'll regret." I held her gaze, steady as stone. I already regret every time I thought silence was kindness. She left without another word. When the door shut, I felt something in my chest loosen, like a knot finally giving way. But my relief was short-lived. Because that evening, while I was cooking lentils, my phone buzzed with a fraud alert email from the bank. An attempted credit application had been filed in my name, for event insurance. I knew instantly it wasn't a mistake. The details were too familiar, my home address, my work phone number, even an old emergency contact I hadn't used in years. Whoever had submitted it had access to information I'd only ever shared with family. My hands went cold even as the stove hissed. Someone had tried to steal not just my money, but my identity. And in that moment, I understood. Being excluded from the wedding was never about space on the guest list. It was about erasing me altogether. The email from the bank glowed on my laptop screen, sterile and merciless. Suspicious application attempt detected. Credit request under the name Clara Moreno flagged for verification. Event insurance. A policy meant to protect a venue, vendors, and planners if something collapsed. The irony burned. They were trying to protect their wedding from me. I stared at the words until they blurred, the lentils on the stove turning soft and forgotten. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe some algorithm had matched my information with a stranger's. But no, the details were too precise. My work number, my mother's maiden name spelled with the accent mark most Americans ignore. This wasn't chance. This was theft dressed up as paperwork. I printed the email, slipped it into the blue binder behind Sophia's disinvite. My collection of evidence was growing, and with it, my resolve. That night, the desert thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a storm pacing the horizon. I sat at the table, binder open, pen in hand, writing out the questions I never thought I'd have to ask about my own child. Did Sophia know? Was it Jonathan's idea? Or Evelyn's? Or had my daughter, the one I once taught to tie her shoelaces with trembling fingers, handed over my information like a convenience store receipt? I wanted to believe she was innocent. But the truth had a way of cutting through hope like lightning splits the sky. The next morning, I called Leah Patel, a local attorney I'd known through Victor's firm. She answered briskly, voice warm but edged with precision. "Clara, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need advice," I said simply. "About money, about fraud." An hour later, I sat across from her in her office downtown, adobe walls softened with woven tapestries, the air smelling faintly of incense and printer ink. Leah listened as I explained everything. The LiveStream disinvite, the canceled transfer, the fraud alert. I showed her the binder. Page after page, she skimmed with the practiced eye of someone who has seen 100 kinds of betrayal and knows they all leave the same bruise. When I finished, she folded her hands. "First things first, what they tried to do is illegal. Attempted identity fraud is a crime. Even if it was stopped, the attempt itself leaves a digital footprint. We can request the IP address from the insurer. That's evidence." "Evidence for what?" I asked quietly. "For whatever comes next," she said. "You don't need to scream, Clara. You just need to show the truth once, in the right place. And people like Evelyn Pierce crumble when receipts are laid flat in daylight." I exhaled, the first real breath in days. "Start keeping everything," Leah continued. "Every email, every voicemail, every text. Don't delete, don't respond, just collect. You don't need to fight their performance, you need to build your record. And trust me, silence documented is louder than any argument." Her words landed like stones, forming a path. I left her office steadier, binder clutched to my chest. That evening, as the sun bled red over the desert, there was another knock at my door. This time, it wasn't Evelyn. It was Naomi Vega, Sophia's childhood friend. I hadn't seen her in years, but I recognized her instantly. Wide, earnest eyes, hair pulled back in the same messy bun she wore at 15. She'd grown into a woman, but in my mind I still saw the girl who used to bake cookies with Sophia in my kitchen, flour dusting their noses, giggles spilling past midnight. "Mrs. Moreno," she said softly, "I'm sorry to drop in like this." I invited her in, made tea, and waited. She set her mug down carefully, as if bracing herself. "Sophia doesn't know I'm here, but she's panicking. The vendors are threatening to walk. Jonathan's furious. Evelyn is pressuring her nonstop. And she keeps saying you betrayed her." I felt the words like a physical weight, but I didn't flinch. Betrayed her? For refusing to bankroll my own erasure? Naomi's eyes glistened. "She's not herself, Mrs. Moreno. Evelyn's had her in a vice for months. She told Sophia it would embarrass the family if you were there. That your presence didn't match the image they wanted. She said you wouldn't understand." The room went very still. "She gave them my information, didn't she?" I asked. Naomi looked down at her tea. Silence is its own answer. I leaned back, feeling something colder than rage settle in my bones. A kind of clarity. My daughter hadn't just excluded me. She had offered me up as collateral, as a liability to manage. Naomi's voice cracked. She's ashamed, but she won't say it. She keeps asking if there's anything she can do to fix it. Is there, Mrs. Moreno? Anything at all? I looked at this woman, loyal, kind, stuck between friendship and truth. I thought of Sophia's laugh at 7 years old, wild and free. And then I thought of her at 33, typing LOL at the end of an email that cut me clean out of her life. No, I said quietly. There isn't. Naomi nodded, tears shining. I thought so, but I had to ask. She didn't stay long. When she left, the desert night pressed close, full of stars that looked like 1,000 watching eyes. For the first time in my life, I realized something startling. I wasn't afraid of losing my children anymore. I was afraid of losing myself. The desert dawn cracked open with a bruised sky the next morning, violet shading into copper. I sat at the kitchen table with the binder spread before me, Naomi's words still heavy in my ears. My daughter had offered me up as a liability, a stain to be scrubbed from the wedding portrait. That truth no longer stung, it seared. By the time the clock struck 9, I had a plan. I drove downtown, binder tucked under my arm like a shield, and walked into Victor Hale's office. Victor has always had a way of noticing without prying. His eyes lifted over his reading glasses, soft but steady. "Clara," he said, gesturing me in, "you look like a woman ready to put someone on the witness stand." "Not someone," I corrected. "Everyone." I laid the binder on his desk, opened it to Sophia's email, then slid through the fraud alert, the bank cancellation, and Naomi's whispered confirmation. Victor read quickly, his lawyer's brain connecting dots before I finished speaking. When I told him Evelyn's words that I should remember my role, his jaw tightened. "That," he said slowly, "is the language of ownership, not family." I nodded. "I don't want to sue them. I don't want drama. I just want the truth in one place, undeniable, so when they try to rewrite this story, they'll find the record waiting." Victor leaned back, studying me with something that looked like respect. "Then build your case, Clara. Lay it out like you're preparing for trial. Because in a way you are. Not in court, but in life. You deserve the verdict of your own dignity." I left his office lighter, binder clutched tighter than ever. That afternoon, while I was sorting the documents chronologically, my phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. An email. The subject line was curt, efficient, and merciless. "For the good of the family." From Evelyn Pierce. I opened it. The words were as sharp as her perfume. "Clara, the situation is escalating unnecessarily. Jonathan and Sophia are under tremendous pressure. You must understand that sometimes sacrifices are required. Your absence is not meant as insult, but as protection for everyone involved. I trust you will find the grace to remain discreet. We wouldn't want unpleasantness to cast a shadow over such a significant event. Respectfully, Evelyn." I read it twice, then printed it, added it to the binder. Another exhibit. By dusk, the storm that had threatened for 2 days finally broke. Rain hammered the tin roof, fat drops splashing against the adobe walls. I sat by the window, binder open on my lap, listening to the sky tear itself apart. And then, through the storm's roar, came another knock at the door. This time, I opened it to find Sophia herself. She was drenched, hair plastered to her forehead, mascara running in dark rivers down her cheeks. She looked younger than I'd seen her in years, not the polished professional who laughed in wine bars, but the girl who once wept over broken eggshells in cake batter. "Mom," she said, voice shaking, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. Not because I was ready to forgive, but because I was ready to listen one last time. She moved into the living room, dripping water onto the rug, wringing her hands like a child caught in a lie. "They're saying you're sabotaging me," she blurted. "Jonathan's furious. His mother says you're trying to ruin everything. But I know you're not, right?" Her voice cracked on that last word. Not an accusation, a plea. I said nothing, just waited. Binder closed on the table between us like a silent witness. "Please, Mom," she whispered. Just help me fix this, please. The storm rattled the windows, thunder rolling over the mountains like a verdict. And in that silence, I realized something sharp and final. My daughter wasn't here to apologize. She was here to negotiate. Her eyes darted to the binder on the table, as if she knew it was dangerous, as if the pages inside could ignite with one flick of a match. Fix this? I repeated slowly, tasting the words. How exactly am I supposed to fix being erased from my own daughter's life? Sophia flinched, shoulders curling in. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the storm outside. You sent me a link to watch your wedding from home. You called it Just Like Being There, and you laughed. Her face twisted, half shame, half defiance. I didn't mean it that way. Jonathan's mom, she— There it is, I interrupted. The justification. The but. Every time you reach the word sorry, you choke it with a but. For a moment she was silent, rain dripping from her hair onto the rug. Then she whispered, You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Evelyn says perception is everything. She said you'd embarrass us. There it was. The knife slid in, clean and sharp. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the storm slashing the desert sky. Embarrass you, I murmured. The woman who gave up her own life to make yours possible is now an embarrassment? Her voice cracked. I never said that. You didn't have to, I replied, turning back. You let her say it for you. You agreed. You signed my name off your guest list. She collapsed onto the couch, hands covering her face. For a moment, the sound of her sobbing filled the room. And I remembered her at 10 years old, crying into the same hands because she lost her spelling bee. I remembered kneeling in front of her, brushing hair from her wet cheeks, whispering, You're still my champion. But I wasn't kneeling now. When she finally looked up, her mascara smeared like war paint, her voice was smaller. I made a mistake. Please, just help me pay the venue. If you send the transfer, we can renegotiate with them. I'll make sure you're included somehow. There it was. The bargain. The offer to include me if I paid. I walked back to the table, placed my hand on the binder. Do you even hear yourself, Sophia? My presence at your wedding is not a line item to be purchased. It is a birthright. I carried you, raised you, fought for you, and you put a price tag on me. Her lips trembled. Mum. I opened the binder, slid out the printout of her email, laid it in front of her. This is what you wrote. This is who you became. I don't need another word. I have this. She stared at the page, silent tears cutting through the mascara. For a moment I thought she might tear it up, beg, fall to her knees. Instead, she whispered, Jonathan said you wouldn't understand. I laughed, bitter and quiet. Oh, I understand perfectly. He wanted your money without your mother, and you agreed. Her head dropped, shoulders shaking. I waited. Not with pity, with patience. Finally, she stood, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. If you won't help me, she said, voice trembling, then I don't know what's going to happen. I nodded once. Then let it happen. She froze, eyes wide, as if the sentence had knocked the air from her lungs. For the first time, she seemed to realize I wasn't bluffing, that the mother who had always bent, always given, always rescued, wasn't going to anymore. Sophia lingered at the door, mascara streaks cutting her face in half. You'll regret this, she whispered. No, I said softly. I regret every time I mistook sacrifice for love. But this is clarity. She left without another word, the storm swallowing her figure as she disappeared into the rain. I locked the door behind her, sat back at the table, and pressed both hands against the binder. The storm outside had shifted the rain lighter, the thunder further away. And inside me, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like armor. That night, I lit a candle by the window, the flame trembling against the glass. I thought of every time I'd given, until there was nothing left, and I realized I wasn't the one who should be afraid of regret. The storm had cleared by morning, leaving the desert scrub glistening under a washed-out sky. I woke early, the binder still on the table where I'd left it, candle wax hardened beside it. Something in me had shifted in the night. Sophia's words, "You'll regret this," hadn't lodged like a barb. They'd rolled off me like rain from adobe walls. I made coffee, black and unsweetened, and sat at the table flipping through the binder again. Each page was a weapon forged from truth. The email, the bank statement, the fraud alert, Evelyn's veiled threats. Together, they told a story so undeniable it didn't need my voice to explain it. By 10, my phone buzzed with a new message. This time, not from Sophia, not from Mateo, from Evelyn. "Brunch, noon, Plaza Cafe. We need to resolve this matter quietly." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. I almost laughed. Quietly. That was her obsession, hiding the cracks so no one heard the house groan before it collapsed. I considered ignoring it, but then I thought of Leah's advice. You don't need to shout. Just show the truth once, in the right place. So I showered, dressed in my navy suit again, and drove into town. The Plaza Cafe sat under a row of hanging chili ristras, the smell of roasted peppers cutting through the thin desert air. Evelyn was already seated at a corner table, immaculate as ever in pale linen, pearls at her throat like armor. She didn't rise when I approached. "Clara," she said smoothly, gesturing to the chair opposite. "Thank you for coming." I sat, setting the binder on the table beside my coffee cup. She noticed it immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly before her smile returned. "I'll be blunt," she began, stirring her tea though she hadn't added sugar. "This situation has spiraled. Jonathan is under stress. Sophia is distraught. And frankly, your behavior has been unhelpful." "My behavior?" I asked, voice flat. She leaned forward. "We are days away from the wedding. The vendors are threatening to walk. The venue is demanding payment. Your decision to withdraw support has placed everyone in a very difficult position." I let her words hang. She expected me to flinch, to apologize, to fill the silence. Instead, I opened the binder. One by one, I laid the documents on the table. The disinvite email, the canceled wire confirmation, the fraud alert flagged in my name, her own letter, urging discretion. "This," I said, tapping the stack, "is the record. Not my emotions, not my accusations, the record. My daughter excluded me, then expected my money. Your son and his company attempted fraud. And you," I slid her letter across the table, "urged me to stay silent for the sake of appearances." Her smile faltered, just for a breath, but it was enough. "Clara," she said carefully, "you must understand, families like ours." I cut her off. "Yours, not mine. Don't mistake my willingness to give for willingness to be erased." The cafe hummed around us, clinking dishes, murmured conversations, but at our table, the air was sharp and still. Evelyn's hand tightened around her teacup, knuckles pale. "You'll destroy Sophia if you persist," she hissed, her mask slipping for the first time. "No," I said quietly. "I'll save her. Maybe not today. Maybe not before this wedding crumbles. But one day, she'll look back and see who really stood in the doorway and refused to let her sell her soul." Her lips parted, fury flashing, but she swallowed it. She wasn't used to opponents who didn't need to shout. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the binder, and stood. "This isn't a negotiation. It's notice. Don't call me again." And then I walked out, leaving her sitting in her pale linen like a statue cracking in the desert Sunday. Outside, the plaza was alive with tourists snapping photos of adobe facades, children chasing pigeons across the square. I stood for a moment under the bright blue sky, binder heavy in my hands, and felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, Evelyn Pierce knew I wasn't a resource to be managed. I was the record. I was the truth. And truth has a way of echoing louder than money ever could. The Sunday before the wedding, Santa Fe was heavy with heat, the kind that presses down until every breath feels like a decision. My house was silent except for the ceiling fan turning in slow, deliberate circles. On the kitchen table, the binder sat like a living thing, humming with the weight of all the truths no one wanted to hear. By noon, my phone was vibrating across the counter, endless messages from Sophia. The tone had shifted again, desperation threaded with anger. "Mom," the florist pulled out. "Jonathan is livid. We need to talk. Why are you doing this? This isn't you. Do you want to humiliate me? Please, just send the transfer. I swear we'll figure things out after." I didn't respond. Instead, I drove across town to meet Victor for a late lunch. He'd insisted after seeing the exhaustion in my face at work. "You need 1 hour," he said. 1 hour, not about them. The restaurant was tucked into a quiet side street, adobe walls washed pink by the fading Sunday. Victor ordered red wine. I ordered water. "You seem lighter," he said after the server left. "Not happy, not free, but lighter. Like you set down a stone you've carried for too long." I smiled faintly. "I guess I finally realized the stone wasn't mine." He nodded, eyes kind but knowing. Boundaries are like locks. People hate them because they make noise when they close. But they're the only reason a house feels like home. I sipped my water, letting the words settle. It felt strange to be seen without having to explain myself. When I got home, the answering machine was blinking. I pressed play. Evelyn's voice spilled into the room sharper now, brittle. "Clara, the venue has canceled. Vendors are leaving. If you don't reconsider, there will be consequences for Sophia you cannot imagine. Think carefully about what kind of mother you want to be remembered as." The tape clicked off. I laughed, a sound that startled even me. Not because it was funny, but because her threat was hollow. What kind of mother I'd be remembered as. That verdict wasn't hers to deliver. I poured a glass of wine, took it out to the porch, and sat in the desert dusk. Cicadas sang in the trees. Far off, thunder teased the horizon again. That's when the headlights appeared. A sleek black car rolled slowly up my dirt driveway, crunching gravel under expensive tires. My pulse quickened, but I didn't move. I knew before the door opened who it was. Jonathan Pierce. He stepped out in a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. The desert heat hadn't touched him. He looked polished, curated, as if even confrontation needed to match his image. "Mrs. Moreno," he called, smooth as glass. "May I have a word?" I didn't answer. Just sipped my wine, eyes steady. He walked closer, posture relaxed but predatory. "You've caused quite a mess. Sophia's in tears. Evelyn is furious. The vendors are threatening legal action. And all of it, every ounce of stress, is because you decided to play hardball." I set my glass down carefully. I decided to stop paying for my own erasure. His smile twitched. "This isn't about you." "That's where you're wrong," I said softly. "It's always been about me. My money, my labor, my silence. You just got used to pretending otherwise." For the first time, his composure cracked. He stepped closer, too close, the scent of his cologne sharp in the night air. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. Do you want to see your daughter humiliated? Do you want to be the reason her future crumbles?" I didn't flinch. "If her future depends on my silence and my stolen credit, then it's not a future worth buying." His eyes darkened. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist. The contact was sudden, hot, bruising. But I didn't pull away, because tucked in the pocket of my jacket was my phone, recording. Every word, every movement, every threat. Leah's advice had been clear. Document, don't argue. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "It was easier when you were always at work, out of sight, out of the way." And there it was, the confession. The porch light across the street flicked on, my neighbor stepping out with his dog. Jonathan froze, glanced around, and released me instantly. His smile returned, thin and false. "Think it over," he said lightly, already retreating. "You have until tomorrow." He slid back into his car, engine purring, and disappeared into the desert night. I picked up my glass of wine, finished it in one swallow, and checked the phone in my pocket. The red recording light blinked steadily. I had him. I watched Jonathan's taillights vanish down the dirt road, red pinpricks swallowed by the dark. My wrist ached where his fingers had dug in, faint crescents already blooming. I didn't ice it. I wanted the mark to stay, at least until morning, a reminder of what I was fighting against. Inside, I set the phone on the table and replayed the recording. His voice was sharp, arrogant, undeniable. It was easier when you were always at work. Out of sight, out of the way. Every word was there, crystal clear, punctuated by the sound of his grip tightening on me. I transferred the file to my laptop, emailed a copy to Leah, and backed it up on a flash drive. If Jonathan thought he could intimidate me into submission, he had miscalculated. I was done negotiating with shadows. The next morning, Leah called. "I heard it," she said. "No greeting, no preamble. That recording is gold. If he so much as breathes in your direction again, we can file for harassment. And the fraud attempt, if the insurer releases the IP address well, let's just say the Pierces won't enjoy having their name tied to that in writing." I exhaled, steady. "So I wait?" "You wait," she confirmed. "But don't confuse waiting with weakness. You're holding the knife now, Clara. You just don't need to swing it yet." The image made me smile. A knife doesn't have to draw blood to change the room. It only has to gleam in the right light. By Thursday, the fallout had begun. Word spreads fast in Santa Fe, faster still when Evelyn's circle is involved. I heard whispers through Victor's office. The vineyard contract had collapsed. The caterer demanded full payment by Friday, or they were out. The florist one Evelyn had bragged about importing from California posted cryptically on Instagram, "Sometimes flowers refuse to bloom in poisoned soil." Sophia texted me at 11:04 p.m. "Please don't do this to me. I can't lose everything. I'll make it right. I swear. Just help me, Mom." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because I knew the moment I sent another dollar, the cycle would begin again. She'd learn nothing. Evelyn would win everything, and I would disappear, one quiet concession at a time. Friday morning, another knock at the door. This time it wasn't Evelyn. It wasn't Sophia. It wasn't Jonathan. It was Mateo. He looked worn out, tie crooked, eyes shadowed like he hadn't slept. He leaned in the doorway, shoulders sagging. "Mom," he said softly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He moved through the house like a man walking through memory, eyes landing on the photographs still on the walls, him and Sophia as children in the arroyo, their father lifting them into the air, my younger face smiling at the camera. He paused at one frame, touched the glass. "It feels like another lifetime." "It was," I said. He turned, face heavy with guilt. "I need to tell you something. Sophia doesn't want me to, but you should know." I folded my arms, waiting. "She gave Jonathan your information," he said bluntly, "for the credit application. She told him you'd cover it anyway, that it didn't matter if they used your name because you'd always clean up the mess. She thought she was protecting the wedding. But really," he trailed off, jaw tight, "she was protecting him. Not you, not herself, him." The words landed like stones, heavy, inevitable, but still shattering. I nodded once, slowly. "Thank you for telling me." He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees. "I don't know who she's becoming, Mom. She's not the sister I grew up with. She's different. She's the daughter Evelyn raised these past months," I said quietly. "Not the one I raised." He looked up at me, pain in his eyes. "What happens now?" I closed the binder with a decisive snap. "Now? They deal with the world they've created. That evening, I sat on the porch again, wine in hand, listening to the desert breathe. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a call, a message, a plea. I wasn't rehearsing forgiveness or drafting excuses. I was still. I was ready. And I knew this. When the wedding finally came, it wouldn't be the fairy tale Evelyn envisioned, nor the humiliation they wished to hang on me. It would be a reckoning. The day before the wedding, Santa Fe pulsed with summer heat, the kind that makes the air shimmer like it's hiding secrets. My phone buzzed nonstop, but I let it hum against the counter until the battery died. I wasn't answering. I wasn't rescuing. By mid-afternoon, Victor stopped by the office where I was filing motions. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, studying me like a man assessing a bridge after a flood. "They're unraveling," he said simply. "The vendors, the venue, the whispers, it's all out there now." I raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know?" "Santa Fe is smaller than it pretends," he said with a wry smile. "Evelyn Pierce built her empire on appearances. People can smell the cracks." I closed the file I was working on and slid it into the cabinet. Good. Let them. That night, my inbox pinged. A long email from Sophia, her words frantic, uneven. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I was wrong. But please, you can't let this happen." Jonathan's furious. "His mom says you've humiliated us. The venue is gone. The caterer's threatening to cancel. If you don't help, we'll have to settle for something small and embarrassing. Do you want that for me? Do you want me to remember you as the reason my wedding was ruined?" I stared at the screen, tracing the lines with my eyes. Not once did she write "I'm sorry." Not once did she admit she betrayed me. Every sentence was still about what I owed her, what I could fix for her, what I could give her. I closed the email without replying. Instead, I opened the recording. Jonathan hadn't realized I'd captured the hiss of his voice, the contempt in his words. It was easier when you were always at work. Out of sight, out of the way. I listened 3 times. Each replay carved the doubt out of me like a surgeon excising rot. The morning of the wedding, my neighbor knocked. She handed me the local paper, folded to the society section. A headline leapt out. "Pierce Hale wedding in turmoil after venue cancellation." The article was brief, but damning. Anonymous sources, speculation about financial mismanagement, vendors quoted off the record. Evelyn's carefully constructed image beginning to crumble. Brick by polished brick. By noon, Naomi texted. "They're holding it in Evelyn's backyard. Half the vendors bailed. It looks nothing like what Sophia planned. She's crying nonstop." I sat in my kitchen, sunlight spilling across the floor, the desert outside buzzing with cicadas. And for the first time in years, I felt no pull to rush in, no instinct to fix, no ache to rescue. Instead, I drove to the bank, closed the secondary account I'd always kept for family emergencies, and opened a new one in my name alone. Anwar smiled as he handed me the paperwork. "Fresh start," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Exactly that." That evening, while the Pierces' backyard filled with forced smiles and whispered gossip, I lit a candle on my porch, poured myself a glass of wine, and listened to the desert breathe. I imagined the scene at Evelyn's estate, folding chairs instead of gold Chiavari, supermarket flowers instead of imported orchids, silence instead of applause. My absence more present than any speech. And I realized something startling. This was never about losing my daughter. It was about reclaiming myself. The morning after the backyard wedding, the desert air felt lighter, as if the sky itself had exhaled. I hadn't gone, of course. Instead, I woke before sunrise, brewed strong coffee, and sat at the table with my binder, my candle, and the silence I had chosen. By 9, Naomi's car pulled into my driveway. She stepped out slowly, wearing flats dusted with grass and a dress that looked slept in. Her face was drawn, her eyes shadowed. I opened the door before she knocked. "Tea?" I asked. She nodded, stepping inside. She sank onto the couch like her bones were tired. When I brought the mugs, she held hers with both hands, as though she needed its warmth to keep from collapsing. "It was awful," she whispered. I sat across from her, waiting. The chairs didn't match. The caterer canceled, so Evelyn ordered trays of finger food from a hotel kitchen. Half the guests didn't show because they heard about the venue falling through. The flowers were plastic, Clara. Plastic. And Sophia, she looked like she was trying to smile through a funeral. Her voice cracked, and she shook her head. She kept glancing at the gate, like she was waiting for you to appear. And when you didn't, Naomi swallowed hard. She broke down during the vows, full sobbing. Jonathan had to grip her arm to keep her standing. I didn't move. Didn't let myself soften. Naomi continued, her eyes glassy. When it was over, she didn't even toss the bouquet. She just left it on a table, people whispered. Evelyn tried to hold court, but everyone could see it. The cracks, the humiliation. She set her mug down with trembling fingers. "I thought you should know." I thanked her, and she left soon after, the door closing softly behind her. The house was quiet again, save for the hum of the fridge. I walked to the hall mirror, studied my own face. For years, I'd measured my worth in my children's reflection. If they were happy, I had succeeded. If they were safe, I had mattered. Now, with Sophia's wedding in ruins and Matteo's loyalty fractured, the reflection staring back at me was only mine. And for once, it was enough. 2 days later, I received a letter. Handwritten, shaky, delivered in an envelope smudged with mascara stains, from Sophia. "Mom, I don't know where to begin. The wedding wasn't what I dreamed of. Everyone says it's your fault. Jonathan says you've ruined us. Evelyn won't stop crying about the embarrassment. And yet, when I think about it, I can't stop wondering if maybe I ruined this myself. I don't know what's true anymore. I don't know who to believe. But I do know one thing: I miss you. I miss the way things used to be. Can we start over? Please?" I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the binder, and closed it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even accountability. It was confusion, desperation, the first tremor of a woman who might one day face herself honestly. But not yet. And I was done living in the not yet. That evening I drove into town, parked outside a pottery studio I'd passed 100 times but never entered. The sign in the window read, "Beginner's class tonight, no experience necessary." I stepped inside. The clay was cool under my hands, the wheel humming as it spun. My first bowl collapsed in on itself, messy and ruined. I laughed not bitterly, but freely. For the first time in years, I was building something only for me. 2 weeks passed before I saw Sophia again. The desert had shifted in that time. Monsoon rains came and went, leaving the air heavy with sage and dust. I'd fallen into new rhythms. Pottery classes on Tuesday evenings, long walks at dusk, dinners with Victor and his wife, where laughter filled the spaces guilt once lived. Then one Thursday, just after sunset, I heard the sound of tires crunching down my driveway. Headlights swept across the adobe walls. When the engine cut, silence rushed in, and I knew it was her. Sophia stood at the porch, thinner, her makeup smeared, eyes swollen from crying. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like a child who had finally realized she'd built her future on sand. "Mom," she whispered when I opened the door. I stepped aside, gesturing her in. She moved through the house slowly, her gaze flicking over the photographs still on the walls, ones of her and Matteo in the arroyo, their father lifting them high, me smiling in a younger body. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she began, voice raw. "I don't even know where to start." I said nothing, only folded my arms. She wrung her hands, words tumbling out. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was doing what I had to," Jonathan said. "He said you wouldn't understand. He told me if I let you in, you'd ruin everything. I believed him. I let him convince me. Her voice cracked. I gave him your information. For the credit. He said it was easier that way. I didn't think. I didn't think. There it was. The confession. Tears spilled freely now, cutting streaks down her cheeks. I betrayed you. I know I did. I wanted the wedding so badly, I couldn't see straight. And now it's gone. The venue, the flowers, the respect. Jonathan is cold to me. Mom, he blames me for everything. And Evelyn, she's worse. I feel like I don't even exist anymore. I took a slow breath, steady. You don't say sorry to erase betrayal, Sophia. You say it to stand in it, and you haven't done that yet. She shook her head violently. I am sorry, but I raised my hand. Stop there. An apology with a but isn't an apology. It's a negotiation, and I'm not here to bargain for your love. Her shoulders sagged, mascara streaks running like ink. She whispered, What do you want from me then? I walked to the table, placed my hand on the binder, the one that had grown heavier each week with truth. I don't want anything. That's the point. I've given you everything, and now I want nothing. Except peace. She stared at the binder, trembling. You kept everything? Yes, I said quietly. Because I needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. That I didn't imagine being excluded, erased, exploited. Evidence doesn't lie, Sophia. People do. Her face crumpled. Please, Mom, I need you. Don't leave me like this. I studied her, the desperation in her eyes, the cracks in her pride. I'll always be your mother, I said, but I won't be your servant, and I won't pay for the privilege of being insulted. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her tears came harder, ragged sobs shaking her shoulders. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, but for once, I didn't reach out to catch her. Finally, she whispered, Then what happens now? Now, I said, steady, you learn how to live with the choices you made, just like I had to. She stood slowly, clutching her bag. At the door, she turned back, eyes red and wide. I don't know if I can. You can, I replied softly, but you'll have to do it without my silence. She left without another word, the night swallowing her figure whole. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the quiet settle. For the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow, I felt whole. The days after Sophia's visit felt like the desert after rain, quiet, raw, and strangely fertile. The earth smelled of sage and clay, cicadas sang louder, and the horizon seemed sharper, as though the world itself had been washed clean. I spent more time at the pottery studio. Clay has no patience for lies. Press too hard and it collapses. Neglect it and it dries into useless stone. You learn to keep your hands steady, your breath calm, your focus sharp. By the third week, my bowls still leaned crooked, but they held water. That was enough. At home, I redecorated room by room. I rolled a bold coat of turquoise over the walls of the living room, the shade my husband once loved. The one I had always been told was too dramatic by children and guests alike. I bought rugs in wild reds and oranges, pottery from local artisans, bright curtains that let the desert light spill in without restraint. My house began to look less like a shrine to sacrifice and more like a woman's declaration. I am here. I am mine. One evening, Victor and his wife invited me for dinner. Their home was full of noise, grandchildren darting between rooms, laughter ringing out like bells. Watching them, I thought I might ache with envy, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something gentler, the reminder that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who sees you, who sets a place for you without condition. After dessert, Victor's wife pressed my hand. You look lighter, she said, and I realized I'd been hearing that word again and again, lighter, as if shedding the weight of other people's expectations had changed the way I carried myself through the world. The next morning, I woke before dawn, brewed my coffee, and pulled a small card from the drawer by the stove. On it, I wrote a single rule in my neatest hand. If my presence is conditional, then my effort is optional. I taped it to the refrigerator. A boundary, visible, undeniable. Sophia tried again, of course. More messages. A voicemail that began with, "I know I was wrong," and ended with, "But you have to understand." I didn't call back. Mateo texted once, asking if I was really never going to make things right. I replied with one sentence, "It's not my mess to clean." He hasn't written since. And yet, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space. In the evenings, I sat on my porch with a book, watching the desert fade into dusk, wind tugging at the lavender I'd planted in mismatched clay pots. The scent rose around me, sharp and sweet, a promise that things grow even in hard soil. One night, I lit a candle in the window and whispered aloud, "I am not negotiable." The flame wavered, then steadied, and for the first time, I believed myself. The weeks rolled forward, steady as the desert wind. Summer waned, cicadas fell quiet, and the nights turned cool enough to leave the windows open. In the quiet, I found a rhythm I hadn't felt in decades. I joined a book club at the local library. Women my age who laughed loudly and argued over endings as if the characters were neighbors. I filled notebooks with thoughts that had waited years to be written. Some evenings I let music drift through the house, old boleros, sharp violins, voices carrying sorrow and joy in the same note. And I danced barefoot on my turquoise floor, no audience but the flame of the candle in the window. It struck me how much of my life had been lived waiting for applause that never came. Now, I didn't need it. One Saturday, I drove out to the edge of town where the desert stretches wide, horizon unbroken, sky spilling into forever. I parked, stepped out, and let the wind whip my hair as I stood in the silence. No phone buzzing, no voice calling my name like a demand. Just me, the sand, the Sunday, and I thought of Sophia, her wedding reduced to folding chairs and plastic flowers, her pride cracked open under the weight of her choices. I thought of Mateo, his silence thick with guilt. And I thought of myself, finally unshackled from the endless ledger of sacrifice. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. That night, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by the window, the candle flame steady beside me. I imagined Sophia someday finding her own strength, not in Jonathan's shadow, not under Evelyn's thumb, but in her own voice. If that day ever comes, I will listen. But until then, I won't bargain away pieces of myself for scraps of affection. The desert wind rattled the shutters, soft and insistent. I whispered into the stillness, "I am enough," and the silence didn't argue. It wrapped around me like truth. So if you've ever had to walk away from the people you loved just to see yourself again, know this: you are not gone. You are not erased. You are not negotiable. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give yourself. If this story touched something in you, share it, comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because silence doesn't mean you've disappeared. Sometimes it means you've finally begun.